Hello, my name is Juliet Atkinson. I am an executive coach and founder of the Coaching Connection. In this webinar, I would like to invite you to learn more about what I believe to be one of the key skills for modern leaders, reflection. And I'll also offer 5 practical ways to help you to be more reflective in your work. So what is reflection? Reflection is deliberately taking the time to pause, to take a step back and sit in the posture of detached, curious observer. Eric DeHaan from Ashridge talks about sitting at the feet of our own experience, and I love this powerful image which for me evokes the peace and humility which are necessary conditions for effective and wise reflection. In reflection, we create a space to listen, to be curious, to appreciate different perspectives, to experience not knowing, to inquire with powerful questions, to process and to make sense. The benefits of reflection are surprisingly powerful in creating new awareness, insight, learning, growth, meaning making, and allowing the new to emerge. Most of all, reflection helps us connect with our wiser voices, which in my experience can be a quieter, softer voice that whispers to us, and reflection helps us tune into this quieter voice. Now, in the modern working world, which we work in today, it can be pretty noisy. It's fast-paced, it's constantly changing, and we're bombarded with lots of information, it's less predictable. And our egos can lead us into some common traps, which can include a reverence for busyness and knee-jerk desire for quick solutions and privileging tasks and doing and spending time on distractions such as constantly checking our phones. Now, if I'm going to paraphrase this quote from the fabulous Margaret Wheatley, I'm a big fan of hers, really worth looking into her work. The outcomes of these traps that I've talked about can range from not achieving anything particularly useful to creating unintended consequences, which can be potentially catastrophic. Now, one story of unintended consequences that attracted my attention last year was that of a fatberg. And if you look at the picture on the right-hand side of this slide, there it is, a monstrous 130 tons of fat, household waste, sanitary items, wipes, and other delights that was discovered in the sewers of London. And that is the thing, revolting as they are, fatbergs are entirely co-created by people. And I was curious about this. I wondered how many small acts of thoughtlessness, of negligence, of ignorance it took to co-create this spawn of unintended consequences, this toxic blockage in a system that's been created for flow and health, that had risen to the surface for all of us to bear witness to our collective behaviour. Now, in my experience, one of the biggest challenges encountered by coaching clients is a sense of powerlessness, particularly within systems, within their organizations or institutions. And yet, we shape and are shaped by our systems. Our power lies within being part of a system, and it's our interactions, our actions, and our inactions that co-create what is. So the antidote to unintended consequences is reflection. Now, reflection is often associated with philosophers and wisdom with a few gifted elite, and you may be surprised to learn that there are actually many well-known successful leaders and entrepreneurs who take the time to be reflective. And as for wisdom, this can actually be a lot more commonplace and accessible than we think, thanks to reflection. Now, psychologist Igor Grossman, who's done a lot of research on wisdom, argues that we can tap into our own wisdom by adopting this posture of detached observer. So, for example, he proposes asking ourselves questions in the third person, or imagining that we are a fly on the wall in a given situation. So let's now look at a few practical ways in which you can be more reflective. And to get the most out of this, I invite you to find a quiet space, turn off any distractions, and grab a pen and some paper. Now, feel free to pause the recording at any point if you want to take notes or practice any of the exercises. So let's look first at self-reflection and how we can start to tune into this voice of our own inner wisdom. I'd like to invite you into an awareness exercise to help you start to tune into this wise voice. So either you can pause the recording or you can take time to do this exercise afterwards. Just make sure that you do this in one sitting and that you just write what comes up for you without overthinking it. It's important that this is handwritten and that you just trust in the flow of your pen. So first exercise is to handwrite a letter from your wise self to you. Next, when you finish that, write a response to this letter from you to your wise self. When you've finished, read both letters out loud to yourself and note anything, no matter how obscure it may seem, that comes up for you. And I'd propose to you to keep these letters and your notes in a safe place so that you can come back to them another time in the future. So that is one way that you can start tuning in. Excuse me. The next practical way of becoming more self-reflective is through journaling. Now, I am an absolute huge fan of journaling, and I'm always struck by the lucidity and sense of truth that surfaces from a seemingly simple exercise. And I think this quote from Dracula by Mina Murray, one of the main characters, journaling is like whispering to oneself and listening at the same time. It's an absolute perfect description of journaling, where we get into contact with this soft voice of our inner wisdom, and we let our unconscious rise to the surface. So here are 3 different ways in which you can use journaling to help you tap into your wise self. So the first one is reflecting on what has happened, something that's happened in the past. So Peter Drucker said, follow effective action with quiet reflection. From quiet reflection will come even more effective action. So using your journal as a space to quietly reflect is an opportunity to take a step back and explore, question, and be curious about what's happened in the day. So ideally, according to the research that I've done for this webinar, schedule 15 minutes at the end of your working day and just write. It's a great way to release, make sense, learn, and identify new opportunities to grow. It's also a safe space in which to be vulnerable, to not know, or to exist in ambiguity. The second way is inquiring into the present. Now, another way to use journaling is a technique that I learned from Google's Search Inside Yourself course. And this is the simple exercise of free writing, so writing non-stop, even if you don't know what to write. And this is for a timed period. In the Google course, I seem to remember it was about 3 minutes in response to a specific question. So adapting this into my coaching practice, I've found that clients can find this as a really effective way to inquire into the present using powerful, mindful questions such as, what am I noticing? What am I feeling right now? What am I missing? And it can be really helpful to use this when something comes up that has triggered a strong emotion or when you need to make a decision. The third way is creating the future. Now, Julia Cameron, the author of The Artist's Way, advocates free writing 3 A4 pages first thing every morning when the day is literally a blank page before you. So morning pages, as she calls them, help you to connect with your own creativity, letting it flow through the day. Now, my personal experience of writing morning pages has been very much a process of calming down the chatter of my inner critic and creating a space for a new, more connected voice to emerge. So you do have to be quite disciplined for this one, and it can take up to 30 minutes, maybe even more, but it's really worth it. And I believe that we are, for better or worse, in a constant state of creation. So better put more conscious intention into that process. So treat yourself to a beautiful notebook, a pen that you enjoy writing with, and let the writing flow. Let's take a moment now to put that practice let's take a moment now to put that into practice with a journaling exercise. Again, you can pause the recording or do this later, but it's important to do the exercise in one concentrated sitting. So take your pen and paper and write down, what is your greatest challenge at work at the moment? What is your greatest challenge at work at the moment? Then, over the next 5 minutes, free write the answers to the following 2 questions. Question 1, what would a wise person say to you? And question 2, what would, insert your name, do? So, for example, what would Juliet do? And when you've finished writing, read out loud what you've written and note anything else that comes up for you. Now, if writing isn't your thing, then another great way to be reflective is to go walking, and in particular, walking in nature. Walking is great for processing and learning, and walking in nature specifically boosts our mood, calms our spirits, and brings us into a peaceful state that is conducive to reflection. And I'm reminded once again of this image of sitting at the feet of our own experience. By the way, if you're in the UK and you're interested in exploring this further in a coaching context, then I can highly recommend Blue Sea Coaching and the Fresh Air Learning Company. So drop me a note if you want their details. So we've explored ways in which we can be self-reflective and connect with our own intelligence. So let's develop that now with ways in which to reflect about others, with others, and tap into the power of collective intelligence. Now, in our current socioeconomic climate, one of the critical skills I believe that is required of modern leaders as part of their reflective practice is the ability to appreciate multiple perspectives and to observe past, present, and future situations through different lenses. And it's this sophisticated level of reflection and thinking in terms of interconnected systems that will help us not only to be wiser, but to avoid fatbergs that we talked about earlier, be they literal or metaphorical as well. So in coaching, we have, for example, the seven-eyed model of supervision, and Daniel Goleman talks about the triple focus of great leaders. And my invitation would be to push these models slightly further. So we've looked in this webinar at adopting the posture of detached observer with ourselves. But what if we were to expand that and examine the impact and consequences of our decisions and actions or inactions in our relationships with our significant others, our family, our friends, our team, our organization, our network, our partners, our customers, our stakeholders, our community, our society, our environment, our planet. So you can see in this process we're zooming out in terms of the different lenses. And let's take that one step further. My friend and mentor Charlie Smith introduced me to the concept of the overview effect. So this is the perspective experienced by an astronaut in space looking down upon the Earth. And I'd like to share with you now an extract from the Overview Institute's vision. And you can also click on the link in the slide for further information. So the overview effect refers to the experience of seeing firsthand the reality of the Earth in space, which is immediately understood to be a tiny, fragile ball of life hanging in the void, shielded and nourished by a paper-thin atmosphere. From space, the astronauts tell us, national boundaries vanish, the conflicts that divide us become less important, and the need to create a planetary society with the united will to protect this pale blue dot becomes both obvious and imperative. Even more so, many of them tell us that from the overview perspective, all of this seems imminently achievable if only more people could have the experience. So what wonderful insight there, and the idea of having this astronaut's view of the planet as part of our reflective process. So observing through different lenses, this is something that you can use in your journaling practice, or in a given situation that you want to reflect upon. You can sit in a quiet space and just visualize or imagine in your mind's eye this idea of zooming out and slowly zooming out further, and just noticing and being curious about what you observe at each different level, and just simply appreciating those different perspectives. Now, from reflecting about others to reflecting with others, and a final invitation on how you can become more reflective. So one thing to note is that these type of reflective conversations that you can have with other people may be very different to what you're used to, and it's not uncommon to feel very vulnerable in these conversations. So creating a safe space is a critical condition, and it's really important that all participants are held accountable for that. Now, in reflecting with other people, you may choose to work with a partner, and this could be a coach, or it could be someone who is a colleague or in your network. What is important to the success of this relationship is that you're committed to the relationship, and that you contract on the time that you dedicate to one another, and also be clear about what you're expecting of one another in the relationship. You may also choose to experiment with reflective groups. I'm always really, really impressed by the power of collective intelligence, and reflecting in groups. It's really can be quite remarkable. And my own inspirations in collective intelligence include people like Otto Scharmer and Frederick Laloux. And whatever your inspiration, I'd really recommend that you start out with the help of an experienced coach or facilitator, just to help you get going. So I've offered you some ideas on how to be more reflective and tap into your wiser voice and into the wisdom of collective intelligence. So my invitation now would be to contract with yourself on what actions you're now going to take with specific and positive statements that have dates and frequency attached to them so that you're blocking out time for reflection on a regular basis. It can be helpful to write this down, to sign it, and to keep it in a place that you can see as a reminder. So all that remains then is to thank you very much indeed for listening, and I hope that you will offer yourself the gift of being more reflective. If you have any questions or feedback, then I'll be delighted to hear from you. For now, thank you, and let's stay connected.